the human body has always been a source of fascination. Since we first began to express in art our curiosity about the human form, the body has become an icon of beauty, an object of desire. Painters and sculptors have toiled to capture it. Philosophers and poets have striven to describe it. But if our image of objective beauty has changed little over thousands of years, our perception of our own bodies has changed dramatically in the last 100. Where once we idolized others, today we are obsessed with ourselves. The 20th century still has its icons of beauty and its objects of desire, but today we reserve the greatest attention for the most important body of all, our own. Get fit, stay healthy, be fashionable and look beautiful has become a 20th century catechism, not just for a wealthy few, but as part of mass culture. Jane Fonda is not a latter-day Greek goddess set in stone. She's available to all of us on a video shelf. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the modern-day embodiment of a mythic warrior, is attainable even to a 7-stone weakling, if he pumps those extra pounds of iron. The population of the planet has quadrupled in the last 100 years. There are simply bodies everywhere. Not only are there more of us than ever before, we have seen more of ourselves than ever before. If the 19th century was the century of exploration, the 20th century has become the century of revelation. Every culture, every body has been exposed to the all-seeing eye of the 20th century, the camera. Our obsession with the body beautiful has become a billion-dollar industry. Our ability to alter our appearance and manipulate the body we were born with has never been greater. We put ourselves through agony in an effort to defy or disguise the ravages of time. But the world of the beauty parlor has been a painful one. Increasingly, we have turned to an amazing array of devices for self-improvement. Our obsession with our body has always been apparent. But what were once tribal gatherings for body painting and initiation are now called beauty salons. Electricity revolutionized the genteel world of the 19th century beauty parlor and created a multitude of frightening and bizarre instruments of modern-day torture. Alongside these newfangled techniques, more traditional methods retained their popularity. Huge industries have grown during the 20th century to help us feed our obsession with ourselves. One of the most potent has been that vehicle for vanity, advertising. Billions have changed hands as women, and an increasing number of men, have sought to disguise, enhance, clothe, or reveal their most desirable or undesirable assets. In the polite Western societies of the late 19th century, heavy makeup was barely used. A little powder was deemed acceptable, but a woman should never paint her lips. To encourage color, lip biting became a common practice. It didn't take long for the cosmetic companies to replace sharp teeth with sharp business. $300 million tubes of lipstick are produced each year with a total revenue of $5 billion. The eyes have always been irresistible. In previous centuries, women risked blindness by dropping antimony sulfide into their eyes to make them sparkle. Modern eye makeup has been made safer, but has the same desired effect. The eye has been described as the most formidable part of the female anatomy. Enhancing the body by the use of makeup has been a universal phenomenon. What has been different about the 20th century has been the presence of the multi-billion-dollar companies of the cosmetics industry. Avon has a turnover of $500 million. Their ladies are a familiar sight in the Amazon basin, renowned for the body painting of its indigenous peoples. As these major companies spread their retail chains around the globe, traditional arts of body adornment are disappearing. Those that survive represent a cultural diversity that continues to defy the encroachment of a global image. In the Xingu region of the Amazon, the men of the local tribes paint their bodies with the markings of the forest birds and animals. The colors and the markings form a complex series of spirit patterns. Today, this Amazon tradition is a dying art form. In the 1930s, the Australian Aborigines' ancient ritual of the penna was recorded on film for the first time. They mixed dead eagle feathers with human blood before applying the feathers to the body. An appropriate concoction for a ceremony that honored the Nana Nanawati, devil people who live off the flesh of corpses. Amongst the Wodabi people of the southern Sahara, men spend hours making up their faces. They use pulverized chameleon and yellow powder to highlight the skin, and heavy amounts of coal to contrast the whiteness of the teeth and eyes. The Wodari believe they are the most beautiful people on earth. In a society where women hold the economic power, it is the men who are judged by the women in a Saharan beauty contest. But cultural diversity is diminishing rapidly. Much of what survives is strictly for the tourists. Throughout history, clothes have been used to display the body to suit the fashionable preferences of the time. The focus of the display has frequently been on those parts of the body which convey our sensuality. The 20th century has been no different, except perhaps for the astonishing range of styles and the frequency with which we've changed our minds. Women have suffered most. The agonies of fashion have been great as women's bodies have been poured into the latest mold, whatever the pain or indignity.
So let them be deformed and crumpled by these instruments of torture, and grow misshapen and distorted, like the feet of the Chinese. Deformity becomes a proof of fashionable breeding, and it is better to be hideous than not to dress à la mode.
Women still choose to wear shoes which restrict their freedom of movement. Their vulnerability, a feature found attractive in many cultures around the world. The zori of the Japanese geisha require them to take tiny, delicate steps. The kimono increases the restrictive effect. Thus attired, they perform elaborate dances in their traditional straitjackets. In the West, at the turn of the century, women were also confined by devious dressmakers' devices. The jupe furo, or hobble skirt, was tapered at the bottom to literally hobble the wearer. A fetter was worn, binding the calves together, similar to the technique used for farmyard animals. French designer of the hobble, Pierre Poiret, said,
"I have waged war on the corset and given free play to the abdomen, but I have shackled the legs."
At the turn of the century, fashion was still the preserve of the rich. An army of dressmakers was required to produce feminine but totally impractical dresses with elaborate designs, hand-stitching and delicate embroidery. Women enveloped their bodies in volumes of knickers, underslips and petticoats. Modesty appeared to be the order of the day. However, the sexual triggers were there in abundance. The natural charms of the body were given a more shapely squeeze by the obligatory corset. It pulled in the waist, accentuated the curve of the hip, and threw the breast forward. The body was covered for modesty, but molded to the point of indecency. Despite the restrictions, women's fashion in the 20th century has been marked by increasing freedom of movement and expression. In the years during and following the First World War, women became part of the industrial workforce in ever-increasing numbers. They won the right to vote. These were new women, independent women. They played sport, took exercise. The ideal body shape began to change. Many social commentators had no time for this new breed of Amazon.
Unnatural athletics ruin her figure and frequently her health. She shoots up tall, flat-chested, colourless, and lacking in reasonable proportions. She no longer has pleasant contours. She becomes asexual and conforms to a standard which is not hers, but that of a man.
But moral outrage had little effect. These bright young things revelled in their newfound freedom. The cult of the new athletic woman began in Germany. They were called Backfisch. They became flappers. The roaring 20s had arrived. Streamlined bodies required streamlined clothes. Waistlines dropped. Breasts were hidden rather than emphasized. The advent of the shorter skirt caused outrage and intrigue. Legs suddenly appeared. In Utah, in the USA, a law was passed to imprison those who wore skirts higher than 3 inches above the ankle. It wasn't just the flappers' skirts that caused outrage, but the dances they chose. The dance halls filled with a new sound, the syncopated rhythms of jazz. Cocktails on the black bottom were the order of the day. With hemlines at the knee, legs were in the spotlight, and a fine array of hosiery was in demand. With the invention of rayon, artificial silk stockings became all the rage. By 1925, even young working girls could afford to venture forth in brightly colored hose. During the Second World War, European women couldn't buy stockings. In their desperation, they turned to the ancient art of body painting. Legs were tinted with makeup, and a line was drawn up the back of the leg with an eyebrow pencil. As is often the case in 20th century fashion, what is one era's abhorrence is another's most appealing accessory. After the Second World War, the corset made its comeback. In the spring of 1947, Paris couturier Christian Dior launched his legendary new look. Fashion saw a return to an overt femininity, not seen since the early years of the century.
I design clothes for flower-like women, with rounded shoulders, full, feminine busts, and hand-spanned waists above enormous spreading skirts.
The return to glamour also brought a return to the agony of fashion. The new look's ultra-feminine shape needed the techniques of fashion's habitual torturer, the corsetier. The feminine form had returned in all its exaggerated and painful glory. With the arrival of the 60s, fashion, like everything else, underwent a revolution. Youth turned the world on its head. Fashion was no longer for the elite. New production techniques and a new youth market meant fashion for all, unisex, proletarian, anything went. In this new global culture, fashions came from everywhere. Indian kaftans, Moroccan beads, Afghan coats. By the middle of the decade, French factories were producing more trousers than skirts. When British designer Mary Quant introduced her miniskirt in 1965, a fashion and cultural revolution was complete. The body on the beach has undergone the most dramatic disrobing in the last 100 years. At the turn of a century, bathing was viewed as purely medicinal. It wasn't until the health reformers of the 1920s extolled the virtues of exercise that swimming really came into its own. In 1946, the awesome atomic tests on Bikini Atoll inspired Paris designer Louis Réard to call his latest creation the bikini. Over the following decades, modesty took a nosedive on the beaches around the world. Perhaps the most significant change in our perception of the human body in the 20th century has been our growing awareness of the body in motion. Through the eye of the camera, we now see it not only as a physical machine of great complexity and refinement, but also as a physical extension of our culture. The ancient Greek ideal of a unity of mind, body, and culture underwent a revival in the late 19th century, as philosophers and educationalists espoused the virtues of healthy bodies, healthy minds, and healthy societies. The mass calisthenics movement in Czechoslovakia, German Turnverein displays, Scandinavian gymnastics, and the development of team games in Britain all emphasize the importance of fit people at the heart of a fit society. Many of these healthy traditions were incorporated into the philosophy of a French aristocrat, Baron Pierre de Coubertin, when he proposed the relaunching of the world's most important festival of physical perfection, the Olympic Games. By 1912 in Stockholm, the Games were a huge success and developed to become the centerpiece of 20th century competitive sport, a universal language of physical culture. The Czechoslovakian Sokol movement emphasized the importance of mass calisthenics. Mass rallies or sleds were organized to reiterate the patriotic message of the movement. The sled planned for 1926 was so large that a dramatic new venue was built, with space for 30,000 gymnasts, and an audience of 300,000, the Strahov Stadium was the world's largest shrine to physical well-being. The stadium was so vast, it took almost a second for the music to reach the most distant gymnasts. The time delay created an accidental wave effect, which became one of the most distinctive features of mass calisthenics displays. The political potential of physical culture for the masses became too tempting for propagandists and political extremists. By the time Czechoslovakia came under Nazi control in 1938, mass displays had already become an ominous part of fascist imagery at the Nuremberg rallies. Throughout the world, governments began to introduce fitness programs in the belief that a fit nation was a strong nation. At its most insidious, mass exercise was used as a method of preparing a country for war. After the Second World War, when Czechoslovakia came under communist control, the Sokol sleds were transformed into Spartakiada, as the state used the Strahov stage to display the vitality of socialism. Even at the end of the century, in North Korea, one of the few remaining traditional socialist societies, mass calisthenics offers a potent reminder of the symbolism of the politics of physical culture. Perhaps the most significant development in physical culture in the 20th century has been the amazing blossoming of personal vanity. Although 19th century audiences reveled in displays of strength, it was two ostentatious showmen who began a tradition at the turn of a century that became a modern-day obsession. The Russian lion, George Hackenschmidt, a wrestling champion of considerable proportions, began to exploit his physique for public display. And Eugene Sandow, a bodybuilder at least 50 years ahead of his time, performed his classic poses in a glass booth before an admiring audience. In the 1940s, the first modern-day He-Man appeared. Charles Atlas was America's most perfectly developed man. The days of the 97-pound weakling were over.
You know, my name is Jack LaLanne, and I'm here for one reason and one reason only, to show you how to feel better and look better so you can live longer.
Jack LaLanne became the first television fitness guru when he started to use the new medium to convey his message directly into the living rooms of America in 1951.
Bye-bye.
But for a while, not everyone took to the new exercise regime too strenuously or too seriously. It took the Austrian oak Arnold Schwarzenegger to change the fetid world of the men's weight room into the fated world of the unisex health club. The gym became the place to be. Another revolution was about to spread through the increasingly body-obsessed world at the beginning of the 1960s. This one would be driven not by vanity about our external appearance, but by fears about our internal well-being. Medical research around the world was finding increasing evidence that smoking, poor diet, and a sedentary lifestyle were producing a cardiac epidemic in Western societies. Slowly, the response grew. Arthur Lydiard, a New Zealand athletics coach and physiologist, began to use running exercises to treat cardiac patients. At first, experts said he was mad, but it began to work. In America, Kenneth Cooper was working on a fitness project for Air Force personnel. His data was published in a book which became an international bestseller. Cooper's cardiovascular health became the new fitness regime. Aerobics, the new obsession. Gyms flourished, clinics opened, and people took to the streets and the parks in their millions. The ancient and awesome marathon became a mass participation sport.
Are you ready to do the workout?
For those who preferred the privacy of their home to pursue their new obsession, the video guru appeared. Jane Fonda has sold over 15 million copies of her videos and books in the last 20 years, and they're still selling. The fitness boom spawned a huge global industry. Billions of dollars a year are spent on sports shoes alone. They are the ultimate symbol of street style. A million strides from the crippling stilettos of the 1950s. Slick advertising using high-profile athletes now beguiles the young consumer to be young, fit and healthy, and able to pay. But the crowds at the opening of a sports goods store in Russia are not buying into the fitness culture. They are merely buying its symbols. The once humble running shoe has become a cultural icon. The desire for all things Western is a global obsession. Nothing has come to represent the westernization of the world as much as the common blue jean. Originating in the gold rush on America's frontier, they have become the century's universal fashion item. In the 50s and 60s, they were adopted by a rebellious, disaffected youth. They were the uniform of student rioters in Germany, France, and Britain. Anti-Vietnam War protesters marched on Washington in denim. But the rebel uniform soon became standard dress. In Japan, collectors of classic jeans have paid up to $8,000 for a pair of faded originals. Jeans became the 20th century's most hyped and most desired item of fashion. For nearly 40 years, China was a closed country, abiding by the strict diktats of communist ideology. But in the early part of the century, it was no different from anywhere else. Fashion was fascinating. With the arrival of Mao's Red Guard, the glamorous was replaced by the utilitarian. The individuality of fashion was replaced by politically correct uniformity. The Mao suit was required dress for everyone. Amid the splendor of Moscow's historical past, the people of the Soviet Republic appeared drab in comparison, their clothes dull and functional. The outfits paraded at Moscow fashion shows bore little resemblance to the fashion trends of the West. When a traveling roadshow of Western fashions arrived in Moscow in 1956, Soviet women queued for hours to snatch a glimpse through the Iron Curtain. But communism has had its day in the Soviet Union, and in China, commercial pragmatism has opened the door to entrepreneurs. In a country that once made clothes in only 3 colors and 3 sizes, fashion reappeared. The luxuries of the West were back with their seductive obsessions. With the influx of Western products and advertising, it wasn't just rigid Chinese communism on the retreat. Traditional Chinese culture was also under threat. Chinese girls were tempted by Western role models. The glamour of the catwalk beckoned. But the standards were high, 5 feet 7 inches, the minimum height to make the grade. Aspiring girls underwent surgery to attain a rounder and more Western look in their eyes, believing that this would make them more beautiful. This was by no means a new obsession. In war-torn Vietnam, the women of Saigon adopted Western clothes and underwent surgery to emulate the Caucasian look, and perhaps hitch a ride to the West on the arm of a friendly GI. Throughout the century, continuous European involvement in Africa has brought persistent pressure towards Westernization. Paul Poiret took his latest haute couture to West African women in 1920. They appear to be somewhat less than impressed. But the relentless spread of Western culture has been resisted in many countries anxious to protect their own cultural identity. In some instances, there has been a distinct and deliberate backlash against the perceived wantonness of Western indulgences. In Zaire in the 1980s, the government was striving for a return to African values and identity. The erosion of traditional cultural styles was seen to be undermining the distinctiveness of the new nation being built in the post-colonial era. Women were encouraged to adopt traditional hairstyles. Blue jeans for women and Western neckties for men were outlawed in an attempt to halt the spread of Western influence. Stemming the tide of Westernization hasn't been easy. Since Europeans first colonized Africa, Western notions of modesty on the one hand and practicality on the other have replaced traditional modes of dress. By 1960, the children of the Red Blanket tribe in Umfolozi in South Africa were attending their Christian missionary school dressed in shorts and T-shirts. But in some parts of Africa and the Middle East, the tide did turn. Despite the pressures and temptations, traditional dress was retained. In many countries, Muslim women chose to remain hidden behind a veil, or had it imposed upon them. Once worn to distinguish Persian aristocracy from the masses, the veil was a mask of modesty against the prying eyes of the outside world. Women could look out, lustful men couldn't look in. Traditional dress wasn't always loaded with the political ammunition it acquired at the end of the century. Throughout Arab history, dress was much more a matter of convention and custom than dogma. But the correctness of dress became a major issue in Islamic politics. The Shah of Persia banned the wearing of the veil in 1936. Women caught veiled in public had their mask of modesty forcibly removed. Egypt was the first to discard the veil. But Islamic fundamentalists have since reacted violently to Western influences. In 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini's return to Iran from exile in France marked the turning point in Islamic revival. Traditional dress, once outlawed by the Shah, was again compulsory. In Afghanistan in the late 1990s, the Taliban leaders turned a formerly moderate Muslim country into a theocratic state as rigid as Saudi Arabia or Iran. Women were again hidden behind a veiled curtain, as if the 20th century had stood still. Elsewhere, life moved forward at the same relentless pace. Advertisers appear to be able to persuade us to buy anything. At the end of a century, the media's ability to project appealing images seems to have had a fundamental impact on our perception of ourselves. Measuring up to the images that have bombarded everyone every day has been at the root of 20th century obsession. The vital statistics of the beauty queen became an international specification by which women were judged, regardless of local conventions about womanly contours. Around the world, standards of beauty have differed. In the world of the beauty pageant, they were never allowed to. The global image has been marketed by one of advertising's most potent packages, the magazine. Their pages, full of idealized body images, have beguiled, seduced, and even traumatized their readers to adopt the latest trend or buy the latest product. Global advertising and a worldwide media industry have become a powerful combination in persuading us how we should look. In the Western world, thin and even thinner has been a constant message since the 1920s. Obsession with slimness has created a massive diet industry. In the 1930s, a tapeworm pill was introduced, which literally placed a tapeworm in the digestive system. Our growing awareness of diet has led to a gradual slimming down of body shape over the last 100 years. Miss America's vital statistics have shrunk by almost an inch since 1940. But still, over a quarter of America's adult population are significantly overweight. The junk food boom of recent years has done little to halt the spread of fat. The surgeon has become the last resort. If the perfect body has been lost or was never there in the first place, the surgeon can bring scalpels, tubes, and chisels to bear. There are now almost 500,000 aesthetic operations performed every year in America alone. A suck, a tuck, or a little bit of orthopedic masonry can work miracles. we can add or remove, enlarge or reduce, lift and tighten, or insert a multitude of implants. Breast surgery is an enormously popular operation. In America, almost 2 million women have undergone the procedure. Superstars have become cosmetic surgery's mannequins. The demand grows ever more as a consequence. Despite the futility of it, there is a constant fight against the inevitability of aging. Tired and weakened skin is sewn and stapled for those obsessed about retaining their youth. But where will it lead? Will the great diversity of the family of man be eradicated in favor of a more universal, ageless model? And will that model conform to a standard measure of beauty? Perhaps in the future, geneticists won't need to clone the human species if we've already made clones of ourselves. Countless millions are spent every year on products that promise to eradicate lines and wrinkles. Cosmetics companies play on one of our oldest fears and offer the promise of eternal youth. But the biological clock ticks on remorselessly, despite hundreds of remedies which suggest otherwise. Even the most beautiful grow old eventually. The final hope for those seeking immortality comes from the pages of science fiction. Cryonics is the ultimate in-body obsession. Freezing a dead body with the aim of restoring its vitality at a future date is far from a proven route to everlasting life. The technology doesn't yet exist to bring it back to life again. But it is becoming an increasingly popular option for those so obsessed with their bodies, they don't want to leave them, even in death. It is perhaps the most telling illustration of the 20th century's greatest obsession, ourselves. Maybe we have forgotten that our greatest asset is not ourselves, but one another.
spacecraft on overhead.